So now we come on to our final session, and we've got three really, really good panelists here with diverse experience and strong opinions, I hope. So we're going to ask them to talk about the telco in 2030. So I'm just going to introduce you to our panelists simply in the list they appear, the order they appeared on our agenda. So Yogesh, hello, how are you? And could you just introduce yourself? You've had a career change of late. Just tell us a bit about yourself and your thinking about the telco in 2030.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I have recently joined Tele2 as the CTIO, and I'm extremely both excited and happy about it. I have worked in operators across the continents. So I've worked in emerging markets and in developed markets as well, with Telenor, with Vodafone, and Vion. Telco 2030, and I think that there are different ways to come at this equation, but I would come from the side of the workforce because it's the companies which are made of people which will make the difference in that era, not only to monetize but to excel. And Tele2 has this vision, which is to become the smartest telco in the world. And one can only reach that if the workforce is continuously being up to date, uplifted, and is playing in the new economy. If I look at the trends, I would I would mark three things. When it comes to consumer, speed and latency will keep growing. Video will become likely the third factor of authentication also. So when it comes to consumer, automation, customer experience, data analytics need to be at the extreme edge. And for that reason, the workforce needs to be able to upskill themselves over the period of time. When it comes to the private enterprises, they will also find a new business model by which they will look for connectivity beyond IoT into the enterprise segment. And for that, it would not only be B2C segment, but it would become B2B2C. And to play that role, you not only need to be customer centric, but you also need to become enterprise centric at the same time. So that would be another area where telcos can excel and participate in the growth. The third one is ecosystems. With the new ecosystems emerging, not only at a global level, but at a national level, there are going to be opportunities for telco to participate in the growth of those ecosystems. And given the data privacy is having a lot of focus right now in each and every country, there are regulations, there are various consents which are required. I think that ecosystem participation for telcos is going to be extremely important to tap into and to participate in. So again, to summarize, telcos have been extremely good at distribution. They have been extremely good at upgrading the networks from 3G to 4G to 5G if I look at the last 10 years. Now I think the challenge is going to be how do we unleash that data? How do we use the decoupling effect of the networks and participate in the new economy? And it can be done if the workforce is also upskilled. So it's not one or the other part of the organization, but it's the whole organization moving to the next level.
Thank you. Urs, could we hear from you? How do you feel about that take?
Hello, everybody. So my name is Urs Reinhard. I'm the Chief Digital and Customer Officer of UPC, a Swiss cable and telco operator. We're part of Liberty Global, and we are right now merging with Sunrise, the number 2 Swiss telco operator. So at UPC, I'm responsible for the holistic digital transformation across the whole firm and as well run the service department. So my very quick perspective on 2030, maybe to complement here, Yogesh. So how will operators look like and operate? I think telcos will be much more digital and much more agile. The road is clearly going in that direction. I can see that as well within the Liberty Global context. But how will telcos make money in 10 years? That's a somewhat different question. And you probably remember the dump pipe prophecy, we heard it earlier today as well. Now, telcos need to become the next Google or end up as commodity suppliers with no profit margins. That was 20 years ago. So today, many of us still enjoy a 50% EBITDA margin, as we do, for example, with the same services as 20 years ago. Internet, mobile, and TV. So although it might not sound very super exciting, I think these three traditional telco products will still account for the biggest part of our profits in 10 years from now. However, then, for me, the most important question is how telcos in mature markets can grow profits and thus create enterprise value, as these traditional products are not really growing anymore. I have perspectives on that, but not the one answer. So I'm very much looking forward to this discussion and to everybody's input here and perspectives.
Thank you. And Dean, I know you have some opinions on this.
Yes, thanks, Annie. Yeah, so I'm Dean Bubley. Also, some of you may know me as at Disruptive Dean on Twitter. I'm an industry analyst. And I'm also a futurist. So just over a year ago, I actually, when everyone was doing their 2020 predictions, which they obviously got wrong because of the pandemic, I did 2030 predictions, and I was having a look at them, and I reckon, whilst I didn't mention the pandemic, yeah, there's some stuff in there which is not too bad. And I've put a link in the chat if anyone wants to have a look. The key thing I would say though is, and this is already happening, but by 2030 it will be clear, is telecoms is too important to leave up to telcos. And by that, I think that what I mean is we're increasingly seeing democratization in terms of both who can build connectivity assets and who can offer connectivity services or capabilities. That services or capabilities is important because not everything is a service or has a subscription type relationship. And you see this already in enterprise, where there's now more private cellular networks than there are public cellular networks, and admittedly much smaller on for the most part. But maybe in 10 or 12 years time, maybe I will have my own local spectrum license, which I can already get from Ofcom for less than £100. Maybe I've got my own small cell and I can generate eSIMs if necessary. Am I then a telco, or am I essentially doing what I can do today with Wi-Fi for my own connectivity and devices? And so I think that this line of delineation between service provider and private infrastructure, or amenity, or wholesale, or government, all of these things will start to blur and break down. And we'll have a lot more interesting wholesale and neutral models. You'll have lots of mergers and acquisitions between not just existing service providers, but perhaps adjacent sectors like systems integrators for enterprise. Perhaps we see content companies already in the consumer space. So I think that there's going to be a much greater level of heterogeneity. One of the things I find amusing is that a lot of people in the mobile industry claim that 5G is going to lead to transformation of industries. But what they don't recognize is the first industry to get transformed is the telecoms industry. It's starting and it's already here. And I think that we have to look through this lens almost of asking the question, what is a telco anyway? Because I think that our assumption that it's an operator with millions of subscribers and there's probably 2, 3, 10 that look the same is flawed. And I think we have to sort of go back and ask that question first.
Okay, Urs, I saw you nodding your heads quite a few times there. Do you want to comment on Dean's comments? You need to unmute, I'm sorry.
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 So lots of interesting aspects there. So one is around the democratization. So we do see that, driving own content and consumer participation is going up and up. telco is a very much a regulated business. So the big question is how the regulators will play and enable that. And the regulators are normally a bit slow. So we'll see how that plays out, but certainly I see something going that direction. And the other one is around disruption. And we're thinking a lot about what is next, right? What are these value drivers? We had voice, then we had TV, then we had internet. And the last 15 years or so, we didn't really have the new big product that would, allow us to grow big time and increase our profits. So now we started to optimize business models, start selling mobile towers, started doing FMC. By the way, FMC is a consumer play, but much more value creation is the M&A play. We just see it in Liberty every day. Billions of market capitalization being created by just reaping the synergies of combining the fixed and the mobile network, basically, and companies. But that's all kind of stops to grow. And so the question is, what's next? And here we're talking about the data, the platform, the digital models that we, with our millions of consumers and customer relationships, can play. And we see, at least from the architectural point of view, that we start to open up our architecture to be able to not only deal with 3 products, or 4 if you want, the traditional one, but offer basically any services or any products to our customer base. Now, which of these products are going to win? Is it the security services, smart home? Is it smart energy? Is it health? Is it transportation management? Whatever, I don't know. Right? I guess nobody knows. And that's the interesting part to watch the next 10 years, which of these bets are going to really create profit and which are just sunk investments at the end of the day.
Okay, Yogesh, I was interested in your 3 different points, because it seemed to me really the common thread through them was about culture. So, for example, to work with businesses beyond connectivity, that requires a bit of different mindset than most telcos have had so far. And also with ecosystems and working with ecosystems, and also making the most of data. As we just heard from Mark Newman, telcos are finding that pretty tricky. They don't have the right skill set. So it seems to me that a common thread is major cultural change within telcos, and I think that probably makes technology look like quite a simple thing. I think culture is far harder than technology. What do you think about that?
No, I think you just summarized it extremely well in a way, because you can give technology. It's like driving a Ferrari, but if you don't know how to drive it, you cannot maximize the use of it. It's like giving a magic machine the latest compute, and you are unable to do that. So I think that, and the reason there's no shortage of data, we have a lot of data. It is pretty secure. It's pretty transactional too. I mean, every transaction which happens, how do you use that in the business process? How do you not only make sure it's used in one part of the organization, but in every part of the organization? So I think it's the biggest lift up in the culture would be that there is a constant upskilling of the resources which would be needed. And I agree that there would be assets which are just providing connectivity. They also will need to keep up with the speed. Then there are assets which will give new capabilities and services. Uh, and I think to keep up all these at the same time, and to make sure that you also deliver the quarterly results as you look ahead year over year, I think it's important that that cultural shift is not a year over year, but it's continuous. It's continuously inculcating new blood into the organization, fresh graduates from the colleges, to make sure there is always a constant upskilling going on in the telcos. And I think that's very important. And I would say telcos will be called maybe differently. There'll be communication providers. They may be named differently depending upon the segment they want to go in. But
it's interesting. I chaired a round table that Mobile Europe held last year with 9 CTOs, and they seemed to think that they much preferred and were working to earn the name Techco rather than Telco. Dean, that obviously got a reaction from you.
And I think some of them are there. And so if I look at what, say, Geo and Rakuten are doing, is they are building technology platforms. They have gone on. So Geo went and bought Radisys. I've forgotten Rakuten's got a majority shareholding in Altiostar for Open RAN. So they are actually going back the other way, either through acquisition or internal R&D. And I think this is a fundamental challenge for the telecom companies rather than the real tech companies. I always amaze me. Anyone who calls Google or Facebook or Apple a quotes OTT company, in my view, should be fired for ignorance and incompetence, because those are the full stack tech companies. They make their own silicon or design their own silicon. They design their own energy management systems in data centers. They've got submarine fiber, build their own networks. They're the ones hiring AI specialists for millions of dollars a year, and potentially getting Nobel Prizes and so on. That's not what I see most telcos doing. And you get bits and pieces. So SKT in Korea is doing some interesting stuff on quantum encryption. You've got AT&T, which has done a lot of work on virtualization. But there's a lot of catching up to do, and that gets very small. You ask R&D budgets of Amazon or even Ericsson or Nokia are in excess of $10 billion a year. Very few telcos, even relative to their size, have more than a percent of R&D of revenue.
So Dean, that you picking on Geo, let's give it its full name, so to speak, Reliance Geo and Rakuten Mobile. It's interesting you pick those two, and we understand why, but they have both been funded by a parent who's had a lot of money from somewhere else. So in Rakuten's case, it's a huge e-commerce company. And in Geo, I think it's shipping and construction and stuff. It's money pulled out of somewhere else. It's not organic growth. It's somebody who came in and ripped up the rule book.
I mean, yeah, but you could say, talking about shipping and so on, Hutchison One Power owns 3. For example, it's not, and it's not as though AT&T is unprofitable and is likely to run out of cash. In the same is true of most service providers. And okay, revenues and profitability vary, but at the moment, I still see a far greater preference to go and, I don't know, if you're Verizon, go and acquire Yahoo rather than build a lab. Or invest in the next generation of millimeter wave, or for perhaps terahertz wave for 6G. Then there's some like things. I was talking to the venture capital arm of a large Asian telco last night, and they're doing some interesting and cool stuff. But I see that the sort of the VC arms are very disconnected from actually investing in technology and helping to scale it, whether it's for internal use, whether it's to, I don't know, sell to Cisco for $5 billion, whatever. I don't see very many of those moves.
Yeah.
What do you think? Go ahead.
Sorry, Anne. No, I think Dean is totally up to something, because it is true that there are certain players who have made platform choices. And there are certain players who have taken huge asset choices. And I think you will see this becoming more and more clear as you go into the next couple of years. And I would say by 2023, it will even become more clear which part of the companies are going in which direction. And I think there are opportunities dependent upon, if you want to go deeper into the nation's economy and the ecosystem, there are opportunities for every telco, because the way nationalization is being done in different countries, the way data protection is being done, and the way the new facilities are going to come out, and COVID is a clear example, whether they are on health or they are on transportation, logistics, services, there is a whole new era of services which are going to come. And it's upon that vision which the company wants to deliver onto, and then be true to that vision and build the work culture to really deliver that.
So, sorry, go ahead.
There's one more aspect on this debate actually. There is a fundamental difference between, let's say, the Googles of the world and the telcos of the world. The Googles by definition are global, and everything they do has a global scale. The telcos are by definition local, mostly limited to one country. And now, as we as telco think about platform games and creating this Nobel Prize type of technology, we will need to make somehow a step up quite a bit to make that actually work and make it viable as well financially. And that will be an interesting thing in the next 5 years to see whether some of these telcos have the guts and the financial power as well to go really global and to somehow decouple themselves from a physical local asset, or whether they just struggle because they have a different approach. I think the jury is still out there.
I mean, I agree, but I see this is actually looking a little bit like the oil industry, where you've got upstream and downstream, which don't have to be in the same places. So if you look at the places where big oil companies get oil and gas out of the ground, it could be in Alaska, it could be in Saudi Arabia, wherever. That's not the places where they have the filling stations or the refineries. And there's the sort of the interoperability layer is the global shipping network and trading network for oil. And so you've got this sort of counter cyclicality. You've had this a little bit with, say, SoftBank, which had physical network assets in Japan, but had, through whether it's the Vision Fund or direct, investments in the Indian ride-hailing or Alibaba or whatever in other markets where they didn't have physical networks. This is happening again. So I'm seeing, Verizon, for example, Verizon has fixed networks around the world, even though it's got wireless in the US. But Verizon Business is now doing private 5G in UK and other parts of the world where it doesn't have national mobile spectrum, because it can say, well, actually, we're going to have enterprise, we got local spectrum, and we'll build or manage or operate or commission a 5G enterprise network for perhaps one of our global enterprise MPLS customers. I think Orange is doing something similar on that as well. And so I think there's an extraterritorial angle to this. And I think having an ability, and I know in the past you had mobile operators go around and buy stakes in different countries. I think there's going to have to be much more subtle than that. And maybe it's infrastructure in one place, service in another, or fixed in one place, mobile in another. So I think we're going to see a return to that sort of international telco strategy, but with much more granularity, and it could be on vertical specific or all sorts of interesting dimensions.
That's really interesting. We're nearly out of time. So Yogesh, I'd like to leave the last word to you, if I may.
I think it's extremely interesting points of view. 10 years, and especially with COVID after the first year, it's a lot one can assume and speculate on. One thing is for sure, the speed is going to increase, demand is continuously increasing, home becomes very important because the places are not going to remain at one place for work, or they're all going to be distributed. So for the companies which understand the dynamics, the companies which are able to take some bold moves and have people along with them, I think they will be able to both generate money, have happy customers, whichever they are, whether they are consumer or private enterprises, and they'll be able to excel in that new age as well.
Okay, thank you. I'd love to keep this panel going all afternoon. There are so many aspects we could talk about, but that was great. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.